My name is Diana, and I am 42 years old. 5 weeks ago, I discovered my husband had tricked me into signing papers that transferred 60% of my cosmetics company to his mistress. He assumed I was too focused on product launches to read the fine print. He was devastatingly mistaken. At yesterday's board meeting, I presented evidence that made his face turn ghostly white, and within 30 minutes, security was escorting him out while police waited outside. Before I tell you how I exposed their scheme and saved my empire, drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this is about what happens when someone confuses your kindness with weakness. I founded Radiance Beauty in Boston 17 years ago when I was 25 years old. I had studied chemistry at MIT, fascinated by how compounds interacted to create different effects on skin. After graduation, I worked for 2 years at a major cosmetics corporation in their research and development department. But I quickly became frustrated with how slowly they moved, how they prioritized profit over actual skin health, how they used cheap fillers and marketing hype instead of genuinely effective ingredients. So I decided to create my own company. I started in my apartment in Cambridge with $5,000 I had saved and a small business loan of $15,000. I bought lab equipment secondhand, rented a tiny commercial kitchen space, and started formulating products. My focus was simple but revolutionary at the time: clean ingredients, no harmful chemicals, products that actually worked because they were based on real science, not marketing trends. My first product line was a cleanser, a moisturizer, and a serum. 3 products carefully formulated over 6 months of testing. I sold them initially at farmers markets and small boutiques around Boston. I would stand at my booth and explain the science behind each ingredient to anyone who would listen. Most people walked past, but some stopped. Some listened. Some tried the products and came back for more. Word spread slowly through Boston's natural beauty community. Bloggers started writing about this new brand with a scientist founder who actually understood skin chemistry. Dermatologists started recommending my products to patients with sensitive skin. Small beauty retailers started calling, asking to carry Radiance Beauty. Within 2 years, I had grown from my apartment to a small warehouse in Somerville with 3 employees. The first 7 years were relentless. I worked 16-hour days formulating products, managing production, handling customer service, packing orders, delivering to stores personally. I lived on minimal sleep and maximum determination. My parents thought I was crazy to leave a stable corporate job for this risky venture. My father was an accountant, my mother a high school teacher. They wanted me to play it safe, but I could not ignore the vision I had for what cosmetics could be. By year 10, Radiance Beauty had grown significantly. We had 30 employees, a proper production facility, distribution in high-end stores across New England. Our revenue was approaching $8 million annually. We had expanded to 15 product lines covering skincare, makeup, and hair care. All clean, all effective, all backed by real science. I had built something meaningful from absolutely nothing. I met my husband Christopher at a business networking event when Radiance was 11 years old. He was there representing a private equity firm that invested in consumer brands. We ended up in the same small group discussion about scaling businesses. After the session, he approached me and complimented my insights about brand building. He asked if I would have dinner with him to discuss the beauty industry further. That dinner led to more dinners, then to dating. Christopher was polished and sophisticated with an MBA from Harvard and experience in consumer products investment. He came from a wealthy Boston family. His grandfather had made money in shipping. His father had transitioned into finance and real estate. Christopher had grown up in Beacon Hill with every advantage money could provide. My background was nothing like his. My parents were middle-class immigrants from Greece who had worked incredibly hard to give me educational opportunities. Christopher said he found my self-made success more impressive than inherited wealth. He said my intelligence and drive were what attracted him to me. He seemed genuinely supportive of my business and my goals. We dated for 3 years before marrying. Christopher attended product launches, met my employees, discussed expansion strategies with me. His family was polite but distant. They found me too focused on work, not social enough, lacking the polish they expected from Christopher's wife. But he said their opinion did not matter, that he loved me for exactly who I was. We married in a ceremony at a historic venue in Beacon Hill that his family arranged and paid for. 300 guests, mostly his family's connections. It was elegant and expensive, and nothing like what I would have chosen, but I went along to maintain family harmony. We honeymooned in the Greek islands, visiting the villages where my grandparents had grown up. It was beautiful and romantic. After the marriage, Christopher became increasingly involved in Radiance Beauty's operations. He said, as my husband, he wanted to help me scale the company to national distribution. He introduced me to advisors from his firm's network. He suggested corporate restructuring for tax optimization and growth. He brought in consultants to analyze operations and recommend improvements. I appreciated his input initially. I was a scientist, not a business strategist. Christopher understood finance and corporate structure in ways I did not. His recommendations seemed sensible. Restructure the company for better legal protection. Create holding companies for tax efficiency. Set up estate plans and succession strategies. He presented it as protecting what I had built. Christopher brought me documents to sign over many months. Stacks of legal papers about corporate structure, tax planning, asset protection. His family's attorney, a man named Thornton, who had worked with them for 40 years, prepared everything. Christopher would explain briefly using business jargon I did not fully comprehend. He assured me Thornton was the best corporate attorney in Boston, and everything was standard practice. I signed where Christopher indicated. I was in the middle of launching a new anti-aging line that required intense focus. I was formulating products, managing clinical trials to prove efficacy, coordinating with manufacturers, planning marketing campaigns. I barely had time to sleep, much less read 70-page legal documents thoroughly. I trusted Christopher. He was my husband. Thornton was his family's trusted attorney for decades. Why would I question their guidance? Around our 6th anniversary, Christopher suggested I hire a chief financial officer. He said Radiance had grown too large for our current accountant to handle properly. He recommended someone from his network, a man named Owen, who had finance experience at consumer brands. I interviewed Owen and was impressed by his credentials and knowledge. I hired him without extensive background checking because Christopher vouched for him. Christopher also insisted I needed an executive assistant to manage my overwhelming schedule. He knew someone through business connections, a woman named Cassandra, who had worked for executives at beauty companies. She came with impressive references from people in Christopher's circle. She started managing my calendar, handling my correspondence, organizing my files and documents. She seemed to make everything easier. Over the next year, small, strange things started happening. I would find documents relocated on my desk. Important emails would disappear from my inbox. Meetings would appear on my calendar that I did not remember approving. When I asked Cassandra about these anomalies, she apologized profusely and blamed software glitches or misunderstandings. I was too consumed with product development and business growth to worry about administrative issues. Christopher traveled extensively during this period. Business trips to New York, Los Angeles, London. Or so he claimed. He was supposedly meeting with potential investors and strategic partners. When he was home, he was distant and distracted, constantly on his phone, emotionally unavailable. I assumed it was work pressure. His investment firm was demanding. I was equally consumed with Radiance. Then 5 weeks ago, I received an unexpected call from one of my earliest investors, a woman named Patricia, who had believed in Radiance when it was just me and 3 products. She asked if I was aware that significant changes had occurred in the company's ownership structure. I said no. What changes? She said according to recent filings with Massachusetts, 60% of my shares had been transferred to an entity called Meridian Beauty Holdings. My heart stopped. I owned 85% of Radiance Beauty. I had not transferred any shares to anyone. There had to be an error. Patricia said she desperately hoped so, but the documentation looked legitimate, complete with my notarized signature on every required page. She forwarded me digital copies immediately. I stared at those documents on my computer screen, hands trembling uncontrollably. They were dated 10 months ago. My signature appeared on every necessary line. But I had absolutely no memory of signing documents that gave away majority control of my company. I would never do that. This was my life's work built from nothing over 17 years. I examined the signatures closely. They resembled mine, but something felt fundamentally wrong. I started searching through files at home, looking for anything Christopher had given me to sign in the past year. I found multiple folders stuffed with documents from Thornton's law office, estate plans, corporate restructuring, tax strategies, asset protection. I compared signatures across different documents. Some looked correct, others looked subtly different. The angle of certain letters, the pressure and flow of the pen strokes. I hired a forensic document examiner immediately without telling Christopher. She was a respected expert who had testified in numerous federal fraud cases. She analyzed the signatures on the ownership transfer documents versus my verified authentic signatures from bank records and other sources. Her conclusion was unequivocal. The signatures on the share transfer were sophisticated forgeries. Someone had practiced my signature extensively, but could not replicate the unconscious neuromuscular patterns that make each person's handwriting forensically unique. I hired a private investigator the same day. I needed to know who owned Meridian Beauty Holdings and why my shares had been transferred there. The investigator worked quickly and discreetly. Within 1 week, he returned with information that made me physically sick. Meridian Beauty Holdings was registered to Cassandra, my executive assistant Cassandra, the same woman Christopher had insisted I hire. The woman who had complete access to every file, every password, every confidential detail of my business. The investigator went much deeper. Cassandra and Christopher had been having an affair for over 3 years. They had met long before she became my assistant. Christopher had orchestrated her hiring specifically to plant her inside my company as his informant. The investigator provided hotel records, restaurant receipts, photographs, text messages retrieved through various investigative means. The affair was extensively documented and absolutely undeniable. But the affair was merely the surface. The investigator uncovered a comprehensive conspiracy. Christopher and Cassandra had been planning this for years with meticulous detail. The goal was straightforward and brutal. Transfer my controlling shares to Cassandra through forged documents. Use that majority ownership to force me out as CEO and founder. Then sell Radiance Beauty to one of the major beauty conglomerates that had been trying to acquire us. Split the proceeds likely over $120 million based on recent industry valuations. Owen, the CFO Christopher had recommended, was deeply involved. He owned 8% of the company through his compensation package. The conspiracy required his participation to manipulate financial records and vote alongside Cassandra's fraudulent shares. Together they would control 68% ownership. I would be completely powerless to prevent them from doing whatever they wanted with the company I had built from my apartment. I spent the next 4 weeks methodically gathering evidence while acting completely normal. I documented the forgery with expert analysis, the affair with photographs and records, the conspiracy with emails and communications the investigator obtained. I hired attorneys, real attorneys who worked exclusively for me, not Christopher's family lawyer. I filed criminal complaints with the Suffolk County District Attorney for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. I petitioned the court for an emergency restraining order to freeze the fraudulent share transfer. I also reached out quietly to the other shareholders, the early investors and key employees who owned the remaining 15%. I showed them detailed evidence of what Christopher, Cassandra, and Owen had done. Every single one was horrified and outraged. They had invested in Radiance because they believed in me, my science, my vision. They did not want the company stolen by criminals. I secured their unanimous support, ensuring that even if the fraudulent shares were temporarily upheld, I still controlled enough votes to fight back effectively. The quarterly board meeting was scheduled for yesterday. Christopher knew about it and planned to attend as my supportive husband, as he always did. What he absolutely did not know was that I had added a special agenda item titled Corporate Governance and Fiduciary Obligations. He assumed it was routine business terminology. He had no possible idea that I was about to systematically destroy him in front of everyone. The meeting was held at our headquarters, a renovated industrial building in the Innovation District with views of Boston Harbor. 24 shareholders attended in person, 16 more joined by video conference. Christopher sat in the back row looking relaxed and mildly bored. Cassandra sat in the middle section, her expression carefully controlled and neutral. Owen sat at the executive table with me and our director of product development. I had dressed with strategic intention that morning. A severe black suit from our upcoming professional wear collaboration sharply tailored to Project Absolute Authority. Hair pulled back tightly. Minimal but powerful jewelry. I wanted to embody strength and control. Christopher had commented that I looked intense and intimidating. I smiled and said important business required gravitas. He laughed completely unaware. I was not joking whatsoever. The meeting began normally. I reviewed quarterly performance across all product lines. Sales were up 32% year over year. Customer retention was exceptional. Our new anti-aging line was exceeding all projections. We had won multiple industry awards. Radiance Beauty was thriving spectacularly. Shareholders asked routine questions, and I provided detailed, confident answers. Everything seemed perfectly normal for the first 20 minutes. Then I said before we proceeded to other business, we needed to address an urgent and serious matter. A matter involving corporate fraud and criminal conspiracy. The room went instantly silent. Every person stopped moving. Christopher's bored expression shifted to confusion and concern. Cassandra's neutral mask cracked visibly. I activated the large presentation screen behind me. The first slide appeared with stark clarity. It read, "Emergency investigation into corporate fraud and ownership theft." Multiple people gasped audibly. Christopher sat up straight, confusion turning rapidly to alarm. I began speaking, my voice steady and clear, despite my racing heart and controlled fury. I explained that 5 weeks ago I learned 60% of my shares had been transferred without my knowledge or genuine consent. That legal documents bearing my signature had been filed with the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. That I had been deceived about what I was signing when Christopher buried ownership transfers in massive stacks of estate planning documents. That comprehensive forensic analysis conclusively proved the signatures were sophisticated forgeries. I displayed the documents on screen. The ownership transfer bearing my forged signature. The detailed forensic analysis report showing microscopic discrepancies. I explained how someone had practiced my signature extensively, but could not fool scientific examination. How the pen pressure patterns were forensically wrong. How the stroke sequences did not match my established signing patterns. How these were definitively, provably not my authentic signatures. Christopher was visibly pale now. People were turning in their seats to stare at him with shocked expressions. I moved to the next slide, showing the corporate structure of Meridian Beauty Holdings. Registered to Cassandra, my executive assistant. I let that devastating information hang in the air for several long seconds. Then I said Cassandra was not merely an employee. She was Christopher's mistress. They had been conducting an affair for over 3 years, carefully planned before she infiltrated my company. Cassandra stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly across the floor. She said this was defamation and slander, that she would sue me for everything I owned. I looked at her with complete calm and told her to sit down immediately or security would physically remove her from the building. Patricia, my original investor, told Cassandra firmly that she needed to be silent and allow me to finish the presentation. Cassandra sat back down, her hands visibly shaking. I continued methodically and relentlessly. I showed comprehensive evidence of the affair. Hotel reservations across multiple cities in both their names. Credit card charges at expensive romantic restaurants, while Christopher claimed to be traveling alone for business. Photographs my investigator had captured of them together in compromising situations. text messages discussing their relationship and their detailed plans for stealing my company. Everything documented, verified, absolutely irrefutable. Then I explained the conspiracy in complete detail. How Christopher had strategically recommended hiring both Cassandra and Owen. How he had systematically placed people loyal to him inside my company over time. How they conspired to use the forged ownership transfer to seize majority control. How they planned to force me out as CEO and founder. How they intended to sell Radiance Beauty to the highest bidder among major conglomerates. How my 17 years of work was supposed to become their massive windfall profit. Owen jumped up and started yelling that he knew nothing about any forgery, that he was just performing his duties as CFO. I calmly displayed emails between Owen and Christopher discussing detailed strategy for the takeover. Emails where Owen explicitly agreed to manipulate financial reports to make me appear incompetent to the board. Emails discussing exactly how to gather sufficient shareholder votes to remove me from leadership. Owen stopped yelling and collapsed back into his chair, his face turning gray. I moved to the legal action slide. I explained that I had filed serious criminal charges with the Suffolk County District Attorney, that the forged signatures constituted multiple felonies, including forgery, fraud, and identity theft, that Christopher, Cassandra, and Owen were all currently under active criminal investigation for conspiracy to commit grand larceny and fraud, that the ownership transfer had been frozen by emergency court order pending criminal prosecution and civil proceedings. Christopher finally found his voice. He stood up and said I was lying and fabricating everything, that I was paranoid and mentally unstable, that the ownership transfer was completely legitimate estate planning and I had fully agreed to it, that I was manufacturing this entire scenario out of jealousy and irrational suspicion. His voice shook noticeably. He looked desperately around the room for sympathetic or supportive faces. There were absolutely none. Everyone stared at him with horror, disgust, and betrayal. I played an audio recording. It was from 3 weeks ago, captured by a sophisticated device I had planted in Christopher's vehicle. In it, he and Cassandra discussed their precise timeline. Christopher said once they successfully forced me out, they already had a buyer offering $130 million for Radiance Beauty. Cassandra laughed cruelly and said she could not wait to finally be done pretending to respect me. Christopher said I was too naive and too distracted by science to ever figure out what they had orchestrated right under my oblivious nose. The room absolutely erupted. Shareholders were shouting at Christopher, calling him a thief, a fraud, a snake. Patricia stood and said she had known me for 17 years and trusted me completely and unconditionally. She said Christopher was a calculating con artist who had infiltrated my life and business to systematically steal everything I built. Other shareholders voiced outrage and pledged unwavering support for whatever actions I needed to take. I raised my hand for silence. When the room quieted, I announced my immediate actions. Cassandra was terminated for cause effective instantly. Owen was fired immediately for egregious breach of fiduciary duty. Christopher was permanently banned from all company property and stripped of any informal advisory role he had assumed. I then called for a formal vote to ratify my actions and to support full criminal prosecution of everyone involved in the conspiracy. The vote was completely unanimous. Every single shareholder, both physically present and on video, voted to support me without hesitation. Even people who had socialized with Christopher at family events voted decisively against him. The evidence was too overwhelming. The betrayal too calculated and vicious. He had forged legal documents and conspired to steal a company worth over $100 million. Christopher started shouting that this was not finished, that his family had vast resources and powerful legal connections I could not possibly match. Patricia stood and told him to shut his mouth immediately before he made his situation infinitely worse. That everything he said was being recorded and would be used against him in criminal court. That he desperately needed to stop talking and retain an attorney. I picked up the phone on the conference table and called security. 3 guards entered within seconds. I told them to escort Christopher from the building immediately and ensure he never returned under any circumstances. Christopher looked at me with pure hatred, mixed with absolute disbelief. He said I would deeply regret destroying him. I said the only thing I regretted was wasting 6 years married to a career criminal. The guards physically took him by the arms and removed him from the conference room. Cassandra tried to leave quietly during the chaos. I stopped her firmly. I said she was not leaving until police arrived to take her into custody for questioning, that she was being detained regarding the fraud investigation. She started crying hysterically, claiming Christopher had manipulated and victimized her too. I said that was an obvious, transparent lie. She had knowingly and enthusiastically participated in stealing my life's work. 2 Boston police detectives arrived within 12 minutes and took her away in handcuffs. Owen tried desperately to apologize, saying he made a catastrophic error in judgment, that Christopher had pressured him and he desperately needed his job. I told him coldly I had no interest in his excuses whatsoever, that he had violated every ethical obligation of his position, that he had betrayed the company and all employees who depended on it, that he should immediately hire the best criminal defense attorney he could possibly afford. Security escorted him out permanently. After they were all gone, I stood at the front of that conference room and thanked the shareholders for their absolute, unwavering support. I said I knew this had been deeply shocking and disturbing, but Radiant's beauty was completely secure. I was still in total control. We would continue creating exceptional science-based products without any disruption whatsoever. Justice would be served decisively, and we would emerge even stronger than before. The shareholders applauded enthusiastically for several minutes. Many came up afterward to express their continued complete faith in me and the company. Patricia embraced me tightly and said she was incredibly proud of how I had handled everything with such courage and precision, that Christopher had made the fatal mistake of catastrophically underestimating me. I returned to my office and sat at my desk, suddenly feeling the enormous weight of everything. My chief scientist, Beth, knocked gently and asked if I was all right. I said I was better than all right. I had just saved my company from criminals, but I also felt emotionally shattered. My husband of 6 years had tried to systematically destroy me and steal everything I built. That betrayal cut deeper than any business fraud possibly could. The legal battle consumed the next 11 months. Christopher hired an exceptionally expensive legal team using his family's substantial wealth and connections. They argued the signatures were completely legitimate, that I had knowingly agreed to the ownership transfer as part of comprehensive estate planning. But the forensic evidence was absolutely ironclad and unassailable. 4 different internationally recognized handwriting experts testified under oath that the signatures were sophisticated forgeries. The court ruled decisively and completely in my favor. Christopher was convicted of conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, identity theft, and attempted grand larceny. He was sentenced to 8 years in state prison. His career in private equity was permanently destroyed. His professional reputation was obliterated throughout Boston's business community. His family was publicly humiliated by the scandal. Some of them blamed me for prosecuting him so aggressively, as if I had somehow forced him to commit multiple serious felonies. Cassandra was convicted on virtually identical charges. She received 7 years. Her defense attorney attempted to argue she had been manipulated and controlled by Christopher, but the extensive emails and text messages proved conclusively she was an eager, active, enthusiastic participant from the very beginning. She had known exactly what she was doing when she infiltrated my company and fed Christopher detailed confidential information. Owen negotiated a favorable plea deal with prosecutors. He testified comprehensively against Christopher and Cassandra in exchange for significantly reduced charges. He admitted Christopher had specifically recruited him to facilitate the takeover, that his designated role was controlling financial information and voting with Cassandra's fraudulent shares to create an unstoppable controlling bloc. He received 3 years probation and was permanently barred from serving as a financial officer at any company in any industry. The divorce from Christopher was finalized with remarkable speed. He had committed serious fraud directly against me, so he had absolutely no legal grounds to contest anything whatsoever. He received nothing. Not one penny from Radiance, not any portion of our marital home, nothing. His premarital assets from his family went back to him, but he would spend many years in prison before he could access or utilize them. I sued Christopher, Cassandra, and Owen in civil court for comprehensive damages. The attempted theft, the profound emotional trauma, the substantial investigation cost the damage to Radiance Beauty's reputation. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours and awarded me $22 million in damages. Christopher's family was forced to liquidate valuable real estate investments to pay their substantial portion. Cassandra declared bankruptcy immediately. I did not particularly care about collecting every single dollar. I wanted the judgment on permanent public record. Radiance Beauty not only survived the scandal, but grew dramatically stronger because of it. The story of how I built a cosmetics company from my apartment using real science and defended it from sophisticated betrayal resonated powerfully, especially with women entrepreneurs and consumers. We gained thousands of new customers who specifically wanted to support a brand led by someone that resilient and strong. Our revenue increased 41% the year following the trial. The company was valued at $170 million. I rebuilt my executive team with extraordinary caution and thoroughness. I hired a new CFO, a highly accomplished woman whose background I personally verified through multiple completely independent sources. I promoted Beth to Chief Innovation Officer, rewarding years of exceptional loyalty and brilliant scientific contributions. I hired a new assistant only after interviewing over 60 candidates and exhaustively checking every single reference multiple times. I implemented comprehensive corporate governance procedures that made it virtually impossible for anyone to ever manipulate me like that again. Personally, the betrayal left profound psychological scars. Discovering your husband married you as part of a calculated multi-year plan to systematically steal your life's work destroys your fundamental ability to trust easily. I saw a trauma-specialized therapist 4 times weekly to process the devastating realization that Christopher had probably never genuinely loved me, that our entire 6-year marriage had been strategic positioning for theft. The therapist helped me understand that Christopher's actions reflected his character and moral corruption, not my worth, intelligence, or judgment. That trusting your spouse was normal, healthy, and appropriate in a legitimate marriage. That he had deliberately weaponized that trust. That I had done absolutely nothing wrong by believing the man I married when he said he loved me. That fighting back decisively when I discovered the truth was exactly the correct response. I learned to identify warning signs I had completely missed or ignored. Christopher's steadily increasing involvement without any official role or compensation. His absolute insistence on handling all legal matters exclusively through his family's attorney. His strategic recommendations that conveniently brought people loyal to him into my organization. Looking back with clear eyes, the warning signs were absolutely visible. I just had not wanted to see them because I loved him and desperately wanted to believe in our marriage. The most devastating realization was that Christopher had almost certainly targeted me deliberately from the very beginning. That he had systematically identified me as a successful entrepreneur with extremely valuable assets and no family wealth or sophisticated legal protections. That I was self-made, which meant I did not have the teams of lawyers and financial advisors that wealthy families use to protect themselves. That I was vulnerable in ways I had not understood or recognized until it was almost too late. 4 years after the trial, I was doing remarkably well. Radiance Beauty continued expanding dramatically. We launched in major retailers nationally. We opened flagship stores in New York and Los Angeles. We developed groundbreaking new products based on cutting-edge skin science. The company was valued at $240 million. Everything I had built was secure and thriving beyond my original dreams. I started dating again very carefully with much sharper judgment about character motivations and integrity. His name was Nathan, a research scientist at Harvard, studying cellular biology. He had his own distinguished career and genuine passion for science. We met at a biotechnology conference and connected over shared fascination with how cells function. He knew my entire story before we got serious. I told him absolutely everything on our 6th date. Nathan's response was perfect. He said anyone who tried to steal from me deserved everything they got, and substantially more. That protecting what you build through your own effort and genius is not vindictive, it is absolutely necessary and appropriate. That he deeply admired my strength in fighting back decisively instead of accepting victimhood. We had been together for over 3 years now, building trust slowly and carefully, through consistent, honest actions over time. I heard through business contacts that Christopher was released from prison after serving 7 years with good behavior credit. He moved back to his parents' Beacon Hill mansion. His career was permanently finished. No investment firm or business would hire him after the conviction. He apparently attempted starting a consulting practice, but could not attract any clients whatsoever. His name was synonymous with fraud throughout Boston's entire business community. I felt absolutely no sympathy. He had meticulously planned to destroy me and steal 17 years of my dedicated work. He had used my love and trust as weapons against me. He had forged my signature on legal documents and lied directly to my face repeatedly for years. Every single consequence he faced was earned and deserved. I hoped his diminished life reminded him every single day of what he lost when he chose greed over integrity. Cassandra was released around the same time. I heard she moved to a different state and legally changed her name. She could not work in beauty cosmetics or any corporate environment because background checks always revealed her felony conviction. She worked low-wage retail jobs under her new identity. I hoped every single day was difficult for her. 6 years after the trial, I was invited to speak at MIT, my alma mater, about building and protecting science-based businesses. The auditorium was packed with chemistry and business students dreaming of their own entrepreneurial ventures. I told them my entire story without holding anything back or softening any painful details. I described formulating products in my apartment with minimal resources. I described the years of exhausting work building Radiance product by product. I described meeting Christopher and believing he was my genuine partner and supporter. I described discovering the fraud in the board meeting where I exposed him with overwhelming evidence. I described the legal victory and the difficult process of rebuilding trust in myself and others. And I described the critical lesson I wanted them to remember always. That lesson was this: the business world will systematically try to take from you if you allow it. Partners will betray you. Spouses will exploit you. Employees will conspire against you. You absolutely cannot prevent all betrayal, but you completely control how you respond to it. You can passively accept victimhood, or you can fight back with every resource and capability you possess. I chose to fight with absolutely everything I had, and that choice made all the difference between losing everything and keeping everything. The students gave me a standing ovation lasting several minutes. Dozens approached me afterward, saying my story inspired them to be more vigilant about protecting their intellectual property and business interests. One young woman said she had been about to sign a partnership agreement, giving away too much control and equity, but after hearing my story, she was going to renegotiate for substantially better terms and protections. I told her that was exactly the right decision and precisely why I shared my story publicly. 12 years after starting Radiance Beauty in my apartment, I stood in my office looking at photographs documenting my entire journey. Pictures of that tiny apartment lab where everything began. Pictures from my wedding to Christopher, both of us smiling for cameras while he was already plotting my systematic destruction. Pictures from the board meeting the exact moment his confident face turned completely white with terror as he realized everything was collapsing. I kept that last photograph prominently displayed in my office, not from vindictiveness or bitterness, but as a powerful reminder of my own strength and resilience. A reminder that I survived the worst possible betrayal and emerged victorious and stronger. A reminder that what I built was absolutely worth fighting for, and I was completely capable of that fight regardless of how brutal it became. My life now exceeded anything I could have imagined when I first started mixing ingredients in my apartment. Radiance Beauty had grown to over 500 employees. We had expanded internationally to 15 countries. Major beauty publications called us an industry leader in clean science-based cosmetics. The company was valued at over $300 million. My personal net worth exceeded $200 million. I married Nathan 5 years after the trial. He had proven through thousands of consistent actions over years that he wanted me for who I was, not for my money or company. Our wedding was intimate and genuine, just 70 close friends and family members who truly cared about us. No elaborate performance for hundreds of people we barely knew. Just authentic love and honest commitment between two people who trusted each other completely. We discussed sometimes what I would do differently if I could somehow go back. I always said I would never sign anything without reading every single word myself and having my own completely independent attorney review everything multiple times. That I would never allow anyone, even a spouse, to have unmonitored involvement in my business decisions or operations. That I would protect my business interests as fiercely and carefully as I protected my personal relationships. But I also said I would not avoid love or marriage out of fear or cynicism. Christopher was a criminal and sophisticated con artist, but that reality did not mean everyone was. Nathan proved daily that genuinely good men existed, men who supported without trying to control, men who celebrated your success without resenting it, men who saw your strength and intelligence as attractive, admirable qualities, not threats to their ego or masculinity. My message to aspiring entrepreneurs was always clear and uncompromising: build something genuinely valuable and meaningful. Guard it with absolute vigilance and appropriate paranoia. Trust very carefully and verify constantly and thoroughly. And if someone tries to steal what is yours, destroy them so completely and decisively they serve as a permanent warning to anyone else who might try. Not from cruelty or vindictiveness, but from pure necessity and rational self-preservation. Because showing weakness invites repeated attacks while demonstrating overwhelming strength prevents them entirely. I had shown that strength when it mattered most. Christopher, Cassandra, and Owen learned the hardest possible way what happened when you tried to steal from someone who absolutely refused to be victimized. They spent years in prison and emerged to permanently destroyed reputations and ruined lives while I thrived and expanded dramatically. That was not revenge or vindictiveness. That was simply justice served exactly as it should be. Radiance Beauty continued innovating and growing. We pioneered new delivery systems for active ingredients. We published peer-reviewed research proving our product's efficacy. We won prestigious awards. We proved conclusively that cosmetics could be both scientifically effective and ethically produced. Everything I had dreamed of achieving had become reality, and nobody could ever take it from me again. Have you ever discovered someone you trusted completely was systematically stealing from you? How did you respond when you realized people you loved were actively conspiring to destroy everything you built? Would you have exposed them as publicly and decisively as I did, or would you have handled it differently? Share your honest thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you or taught you something valuable, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real stories about protecting yourself from betrayal and standing up powerfully for what is rightfully yours. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that they do not have to passively accept being stolen from, that they have every right to fight back with overwhelming force, and that justice is absolutely possible when you refuse to accept being defeated or diminished. Thank you so much for listening to my story with attention. I sincerely hope it reminds you that what you build through your own intelligence and effort deserves fierce protection, that trust must always be earned and verified, rather than blindly given, and that the best possible response to calculated betrayal is swift, overwhelming, and absolutely decisive justice. Take excellent care of yourself, document everything carefully, and never let anyone convince you that defending what you have rightfully earned is somehow wrong or excessive. You deserve to keep what you have built.